Hey everybody. Um, so today to start off, before I get into the lecture, gonna have quite a beefy little chat. Today is not so much a rant; it's supposed to be a structured instructional component of the video, and you're probably gonna find this on YouTube. And if you do, you found it because you're in a state of mind where it should be helpful for you. Um, Now, I was going to do a rant about how repeating affirmations a million times is not necessarily going to get you your manifestation, but I said that is like, well, that's just kind of a not exactly productive opinion. And for someone who is using that as a technique and has already had some initial success with it, that could plant a seed of doubt in their mind. And I don't want to, be involved in that. I don't want to do that. And what do people want? Why are you watching this video? You want your manifestation. So do I. So we're here to discuss how to get these things. And now when it comes to, because whatever your assumption about technique is going to manifest out too. So if you assume that whatever doing a million affirmations works, it will work for you. If you truly assume that that's true, it will. If you really believe that you don't have to believe, then you don't have to believe. That's kind of one of the paradox about you can make your own rules. And of course, all that works because you are God and God the Father. Not God of your reality, not God of this 50 square feet of space. God the Father who created everything that has ever existed and exists now and will ever exist. That's your true self. You just don't remember that. You think you're a human with your name, your specific history, but that is not true. That's not who you actually are. Okay, so we're gonna get into this heuristic. I'll pop up the graphic for it in a bit. And heuristic is just a method. Okay, so it's not a technique. It's a way to see if what you're doing is actually going to work. If you're applying the law properly or not. And this is something you can use at any stage of manifesting something. The shortest version of it is if I ask you right now, do you have what you want? What is your immediate mental response? Now that question should be conditioned to the desire. So if your desire is for money, if I ask you, are you rich? Your immediate mental reply to that question is your dominant state. And if you want to be rich and your current answer is, well, no, like I'm 2 months behind on rent, or I'm still in a ton of debt, but I'm manifesting to be rich, then you're not in the state. You didn't really properly capture it. If your immediate reply is, yeah, I have all the money I'll ever need, really, truly, if that's really what your mind immediately thinks, then yes, you have captured the state. When it comes to a relationship, it's someone casual, imagine it's not me, imagine it's someone you just met. Like, oh, you in a relationship? What does your mind immediately think? Do you think, well, I like this guy, but I'm not sure if he likes me, and we're kind of dating, but not really? Or if you think, well, they won't take my calls, I haven't seen them in 6 months, and I'm trying to manifest getting them back. Or does your mind say, yeah, I'm married? Even if you have zero evidence, even if the person hasn't talked to you in 2 years, if your mind immediately says, yes, I'm married, then you know the state you're in, okay? So that's the simplest form of this heuristic when it comes to job. What do you do for work? Very common question. What answer does your mind prepare? In that, when I ask you, what do you do for work? What does your mind say? Does it say, oh, well, I haven't had a job in 3 months, or haven't had a job since COVID, or well, I work as an accountant, but I really want to be in mustard seed distribution, or if it says like, yeah, well, I'm in the industry I want to be in. Let's say I work in the art history department at a university, but I really want to be a tenured professor. Well, if your mind is saying that and you really want to be a tenured professor, you have to mentally step into when someone asks you, oh, what do you do? Oh, I'm a tenured professor in art history. Even though you're right now only an adjunct. Your mind's response tells you your state and if you've assumed it or not. So let's look at the more detailed heuristic. Let me just pull it up, and I'm calling this, though it's not stated on there, "Get your breakthrough," because what a bunch of clickbait bullshit. But hey, if I did include that in the title or something, it got you here. Let me adjust the opacity a little bit so that the text is a little more readable on screen. Okay. All right, now this is really geared for intermediate manifestors. Let me just adjust the color again. I'm going to make it a little bit more gray and a little darker. All right, that's probably a lot better. All right, this is more for intermediate level manifestors, people who have been conscious about what they're doing for long enough to have several major manifestations. Like let's be real here. We do mentally organize things based on how desirable they are to us as big or small, and so this is geared towards people who have had several major big manifestations, innumerable, medium-sized and small manifestations every day. It could also be geared towards someone who's had like the one big thing, and they've started to notice a bunch of medium and little things. Okay, so it's not necessarily a question of time. It's more a matter of confidence and faith in the law. So if you say, I have absolute faith in the law, I just don't know why these certain things aren't here yet. Perfect. This is the video for you. If you say, I know the law works, but I'm not 100%, this is also probably the video for you. If you just found, there's some shades of gradients between that and the next person I'm going to describe. But if you just found Neville, you don't know if the law works, you're really not sure about it. You've tested, you've had some results, but you don't really know. Even if that's been you for a couple years now, this is not the video for you. You need to manifest faith first. And instead of linking a video, I will just tell you right now, use this method I'm going to describe and apply it towards faith. So if you have a technique that you know reliably works for you, use it towards manifesting total faith and confidence in the law and faith in the law and confidence in yourself. I did that. I did that as one of my first manifestations. I imagined a conversation with a friend. The unfolding was not what I expected, but it played out over the course of about 3 to 5 months. And when it finally did manifest, the scene was not exactly what I imagined, but it was in the place I imagined it. And I actually felt it with a greater intensity when I told him I have total faith in the law than I did in the imaginal act that I had done months prior. And so if that's how you manifest using scenes, use the exact thing I just told you. If whatever other way you use to manifest, use it to manifest faith, and then come back and see and check on your other things. But that's the heuristic in short. So it is helpful if you already have lists where you've documented your desires and their manifestation and possibly what you've done in that interval. So I have a bunch of William Blake journals. I have 3 of them full, where I keep, there's a poetry of William Blake used as the lines, and I keep them full of lists of my desires, and then I mark them off when they manifest, and I put the date. So I put the date of the desire, and then I put the date of manifestation usually. And the coolest shift that has, and I recommend everybody does this, everybody. The coolest thing that has happened is that I went from doing desire lists all the time, and then noticing that basically everything took, for the most part, everything took a while. A few things would happen fairly quickly in 1 or 2 weeks, but a lot of things were taking months. Now I don't even get to write them down. I have to go back after the thing has manifested and log, like, oh, well, this manifested same day, this manifested in 20 minutes, this manifested this week when I imagined it on Monday, and I didn't even bother putting it on a list. So that shift has been really cool to notice. But So if you don't have these lists already, like you haven't been doing this as a journal, this is a suggestion I got from Joseph Ally, but it's also something I was doing before I knew about manifesting, just as like goal planning. But I've always made lists, but not this specific to conscious manifesting. But if you don't have this already, that's okay. You can make these lists. So first, you want to go through, if you have these books, go through your prior manifestations, or right now, make a list of the top 10 to 20 things you've manifested recently. Because I do think the more recent, because your assumptions about how you manifest have changed. So you do want to look at what the recent ones are, so you have a better idea of what assumptions about manifesting are at play for you now. But look through all of those, and then as you look through them, remember, and if I highly recommend too, that you also write notes of how you did each one. So if for one, you can remember you had a specific thought and a brief visual about it, and it manifested that day, log that. Write that down so you know that. If another one you affirmed for like 2 months on and off casually, write that down. You can also include some other things you want information about, like did you know when the thing was going to manifest? Did you have any indicators that the thing was going to manifest prior to its manifestation? But the idea is that you're extracting from this primarily how you manifest. And there's going to be different ways, but what are the different ways you use your mind and see it express on the screen of space? And you can also look at what is the way I do that's not only most effective in terms of its closeness to what you originally thought, and also like which is most rapid. So overall, which is the best ways that you're already using that are already happening for you. Okay, so once you have all that information, this is going to take some time. So you may not be able to do all this, just in an afternoon in one sit down, but, make this like your exercise throughout the week, and then make this part of your just conscious way of living, where whenever there's something big you don't have yet, use this heuristic on it. So make a list of I'm sure you already have your desire list, your big desires, right? So just pull that list up, okay? If you haven't bothered making that list yet, come on, right now, what are the big things you want that you think haven't manifested yet? And additionally, especially because Neville so encourages that this is the way to really awaken Christ, your imagination within you, 5 or more if you want, friends or family members, and their primary desire. Okay, include that list as well. So your big desires and some of your friends and family and their big desires. Okay. Now we're going to do a comparison. Go by each one and look at it, and seriously, the only person you're going to rob if you're lying here is you. Now you can also revise and adjust mentally how you feel about these things, but look at each one and say, have I really claimed that in mind? Have I used one of these techniques I know works on this? So if you really want a certain body expression, you want a certain ideal weight, certain appearance to the way you look, and something that hasn't manifested out yet, look at it and say, well, I know I'm very much a visualizer, but I've really struggled visualizing like how I would see myself in the mirror with this certain appearance change or at this certain weight. So admit to yourself, well, this is a stumbling block here. I know this is the main way I manifest everything I want is visualization. So I really have to take the time and commit to visualize myself in this ideal appearance. And if there's other supplementary ways, other techniques you could use instead that would also work, well, ask yourself, well, did I apply any of those? So if you haven't done it, if you know imaginal conversations without any visual component, just imagining a person, hearing their voice and talking to them, works for you pretty reliably, almost all the time or all the time. And you haven't even bothered imagining telling a friend that that you look that certain way, or them remarking on your appearance. If you haven't done that yet, now is the time to do that. So you want to look at each thing, and say, have I really applied what I know currently to be my best technique, my most effective way of thinking, because all mind is imagination. All your thoughts are imaginal. Everything is an imaginal activity, right? Have you applied your best thought, your best focus to this desire? Because if it hasn't expressed yet, it doesn't mean you haven't done that, but sometimes it means you haven't done that. Sometimes it means you really haven't put your full heart into it. You have not felt into that state at all. And you could have already said a million affirmations about it, but if you look and you realize, like, gee, most of the things I manifest I'm not affirming about, well, you got to admit, look, I'm not putting my best foot forward on this. I'm not really applying my divine gift in the best possible way based on my current skill set. So be honest with yourself. Okay, now if you look at something and you're like, everything I know that works for me, I have already done for this thing. And I've done them millions of times. I've met every single assumption that Neville ever said or some other coach ever said. I've done it all. I've done it all. I know this thing is guaranteed for me. I know this is what I will inevitably experience. However, I'm still upset that it isn't here. And I still keep looking for it. I still keep waiting for it. I'm still anxious about when it's going to come. I still feel lack that it's not here yet. This is where you have got to, like, you really have to physically set yourself down and accept and know and believe that it is already done. This is a movement in mind that should have naturally happened during one of your imaginal acts already. However, you keep interrupting it. So every time, it's not that these things block your manifestations, because I remember my recent conversation with Daphne, she said, well, you should look at, is there something alive in you that is blocking it? I don't believe that. You're not going to block your manifestation. However, simply focusing on it not being here is enough to sort of tamper with its development and delay it. Like, there's no deeper thing blocking it necessarily other than your simple focus on it's not here. So that's what we have to adjust. Every time that you go, it's not here, when is it going to be here? You're not ripping up the seed, but you're fiddling with the soil in a non-productive way. And depending on the intensity with which you're doing it, you might just be one of those people who's like stamping the ground, stamping the ground of it, like, where is it? That's not going to make it grow any faster. Your thoughts, your predominant thoughts about this thing should be watering it. Should be acknowledging that it's not, just dirt with nothing visible. You should look at it and see the full blossomed tree and feel the joy of accomplishment, that you grew that you created that you achieved that. If that's lacking, when you think about it immediately and you just see the seemingly barren land instead of the fruit-bearing tree, if that's what's going on in your mind, I think it's just a pattern of thoughts that are creating this mirage for you. And in your moments of imaginal acts, you've seen that tree. And you really just need to redirect your focus towards that and the feeling towards that. It may be that when you imagined for it, you did imagine at a deep intensity, so it will occur. However, your thoughts throughout the day are just so contrary that you keep forgetting that. You're just focused too much on it not being here as opposed to being focused on it being here. And for some things, that's pretty difficult because it requires a major adjustment of all your thoughts. But the main adjustment is when you think about the thing, are you feeling that you don't have it or you do have it? If you're feeling that I don't have it and that sucks, you still need to keep imagining. You still need to adjust your state. If you feel like I have it, but where is it? That is a complex state, and that is one that I am finding myself in quite a few things. And in terms of, if I look at all the things I have manifested out, I cannot possibly think about them. Where is it? What do you mean, where is it? Like the sofa that I wanted for years, that before I knew about conscious manifesting, I still applied the same techniques that I know work for me in order to get it and to get pretty close to the exact sofa I want. I'm not worried about where this sofa is. It's right there. And we have to be able to do that with these things that we really, really want. Hey, Cyber King, how's it going? Yeah, well, so you might have just tuned in as I'm getting towards the end of this explanation, but I'm trying to give a heuristic for when you have these things that you really want, where you feel like you've claimed it, but where is it? I mean, the best advice I could give myself right now is that, look, you know you've done enough. You know that this thing is yours. It is time to really, truly accept and believe that it is going to come. And it's time to be happy about that, not to keep thinking there's more that needs to be done. If you really, truly know I did what was asked of me, I have claimed it, it is mine, this is inevitable, it's time to be happy about that and to really enjoy that that is true. It's one of these things where it's a movement in mind that is very personal. And you only find yourself in this conundrum because it's something that's going to be a part of your daily life, and so you just keep noticing the lack. But in those cases, you have to train yourself that when you start to notice the lack, to instead notice the presence, even though the presence may not be in this 3D world, because it's all your projection anyway. So, like, let's say it is for money. The most useful one for money is whenever you start to think you can't afford something, buy it in mind. Mentally, buy the thing. So if you are looking at stuff online and you're like, oh man, I'd really like I looked today, I made some imaginary purchases today of really high-end knives. I was watching a stream where a guy was making jokes about selling knives, and I started, because I was like, I don't really have good knives, so I started looking at just sites where they sell knives, and I found these really high-end, like, sushi knives, like really nice steel, amazing knives. I bought them in mind. So I picked out the ones I wanted, and I mentally paid for them. I mentally bought them. I have used this effectively for like a lot of donation campaigns. When people are raising money for things, I will mentally give a donation myself or mentally see other people make donations, and then they make equivalent or larger donations, usually pretty shortly after. It's really cool. So start doing that with money. Now, when it comes to a relationship, if you really want daily contact with someone, daily presence with them, in the moments where you feel like they're not there, you wish they would call you, blah, 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 make that movement in mind. So if you want them to text you right then, mentally receive that text from them. If they would be living with you, if they would come home at that time, this is the time when they come home. Take a few moments to imagine what it is like when they come home at that time of the day. If this is a bodily condition, if you're like, this is what I'm starting to try to do when it comes to body. So if you're out taking a walk and you want the walk to be more pleasurable, but you're currently experiencing a lot of pain, that is the time it really does work to take your mind and think like, oh, I remember when this used to be a pain in the ass, and now it is so easy, it's so enjoyable, I can enjoy my walks again, it's really great. I've been doing that, it has been helping me get back on track with my walks, which I used to enjoy and stopped enjoying. So these are like little subtle moments where you have to catch your mind and redirect it. But this general, larger, bigger picture movement of acceptance is one that really has to occur. Because until it occurs, until you really feel there's nothing more I need to do, there's no more assumptions I need to rewrite, there's no blocks I need to delete, there's nothing blocking what I want, there's no self-concept change I need to make. Right now, sit down, believe this, accept this within yourself. Right now, I am totally perfect. I am totally ready to experience this desire. This is who I am now. This is what is normal for me. This is what is typical for me. There's no more adjustments I need to make. There's no more imagining I need to do. This is who I am now. It really just truly accept that for yourself. Now, as a little bonus activity, I want to include, so when you're looking over your list of the ways that are effective for you to manifest, you're going to come across some techniques and rules. Also, look at your rules that are still in operation for you right now that kind of suck. So I know one that a lot of people get contaminated with is that you have to let it go. And this might be something I talked to Daphne about because I believe she's been able to adjust this for herself. But like when they say let it go, they mean like you have to basically forget it, stop thinking about it, which really sucks as a rule because I mean there's very little that's better than receiving a desire while it's really hot, while it's something you really want, and receiving it like at the height of that desire. That's one of the most pleasurable experiences, and it's sad that people might take on that rule and then therefore limit their reality. But so if you find a rule like that, use a technique. You can even use the own technique you don't like on it to dissolve it. So if you find that you made a rule for you that you have to let it go in order for it to manifest, and you mostly do imaginal conversations with people, do an imaginal conversation where you tell your friend, oh, I don't have, like I used to have to let it go in order to get it, and now I don't have to do that anymore. I can still like actively desire the thing and end up getting it. Now, of course, because that let it go rule is still going to be in operation, you would have to let that conversation go. You would have to forget that conversation. However, letting it go is for you now, you would have to do that. But then from there on out, it would manifest. I use this to alter my thinking a couple times, and I want to do it again. I first used it, well, I used it to manifest faith, but I also around that same time used it to manifest, for the most part, like for 95% freedom from rumination. I had a very ruminative mind when I found Neville, and I just had thoughts that were very punishing and disturbing, and like just kind of tortured myself all the time. And I someone suggested to me to do that, to imagine that I don't do it anymore. And so I did that. Actually, she suggested it after I had done it, but I did the scene a little bit wrong, so I had to adjust it. But the scene simply was, I imagined telling my friend, I used to ruminate all the, I think I even said ruminate in the imaginal act, but it's like, I used to ruminate all the time. It really sucked. But then all of a sudden in summer of, I think it was 2019 or 2020, poof, all those thoughts just disappeared. The alteration I needed to make was to add, and they haven't come back since. Because the first time I did the scene, I just said, oh, they just poof disappeared. So they poof disappeared, but then they came back a week later. When I said, and they just poof disappeared, and they haven't come back since. So that has stayed in place. And I think it was 2019, so it's stayed in place for 2 years now, going on 2 years now. And you can use that trick for any form of thought. There are a couple of forms of thought I want to still manifest alterations in. Mostly when it comes to revision, I want my revision to be a lot more effective and easy to do. But you can use this trick for any skill set in mind that you find you don't really like right now, that is a little bit punishing for you. And this applies for even things that Neville says are, this is the way you do it. You can still alter all those things. So any sort of thoughts about manifesting you've picked up from Neville, from contemporary teachers, from the old man way of thinking about the world, any of those can be altered, okay? Because the only law is a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. So whatever you believe about manifesting is also going to manifest out. And this heuristic is designed to help you identify and discover what are the ways you're currently primarily having the most effective success. Now that is going to adjust. That is why I suggest it should be a lifelong heuristic, something you're looking at all the time, something you're adjusting as you go. Like one recent adjustment that I have made, and it hasn't fully manifested out yet, is so obviously the concept is that you have to totally not experience desire anymore in order to have the manifestation. Well, I don't like that. And I also don't like that you have to have a scene in order for it to move in consciousness. I don't like that either. Because I know Neville talks about quick and easy, immediate assumptions. A second desire comes upon you, assume you have it, and that is what I want to move towards and move in. And so the adjustment I made is that I decided, and I did scenes about it, and I just kind of affirmed it a bit. I decided I can say I want X and get it. Right now, that's about, it's not over 90% yet, but it is about like 80%. And it has started happening. There is still like an arrangement of mine where if it's a bigger thing, it doesn't necessarily work. But small things, it started working like pretty universally. The thing is, I have to be careful because if I say, well, I want, like, let's say, I really genuinely have to want the thing too, is kind of like a sub rule that I included in this idea, because I have a general belief and assumption that, for the most part, my unfoldings are going to be pleasant, and I'm not going to experience a lot of unwanted stuff. But so if I say I want birthday cake, and I've also decided I could specify times, and the time is less effective right now than just the I want. But let's say I want birthday cake this afternoon, and that's it. I don't have to include a scene. I don't have to affirm about it. I don't have to drop my desire for cake. I don't have to become the person who's eating cake. Like, I can just say that, and I don't even have to visualize or anything, and get the thing. And those have started happening for me. Now, that is an adjustment in mind that took me a long time, and it's still something I'm working on, just because even once you have faith in the law, you have to start pulling apart all these smaller assumptions that you've taken on and created about how you manifest. And so I'm hoping that this heuristic that I've given here is one that will help you pull apart some of those things, and be more effective in your imaginal activity and expression. You also might want to look at, when it comes to these big desires, did you make rules about it? So did you make rules about when it's going to happen, how it's going to happen? Like, I know it's very trite advice to let go of the how, but once you accept that you already have it, you don't care about the how, mostly. You're still going to have a desire to not have a how that sucks, right? Like, you're still going to have a strong desire to not have a turbulent unfolding like Neville did when it came to marrying his second wife. Like, you're going to want a mostly good and drama-free unfolding. That is also an assumption you can plant using your preferred techniques. Okay, so I'm going to take a quick little break, and then we're going to come back and do the lecture for today. And the lecture for today is You Can Never Outgrow I Am. I was going to do one that was primarily concerned about time of manifestation. However, I didn't like it because it was a little bit so it did give the same message I'm giving here, which is you need to accept that it's done. But there was another message in it that I didn't like, and you won't like either, which is sometimes you have to wait. Sometimes you have to wait. And while you're waiting, you just reassure yourself, but also accept and really feel and know to be true and enjoy the fact that it's already done. And being able to do that when you have no evidence whatsoever is something that takes mastery, takes time. And no amount of techniques are going to get you there. It really is about experience. It really is about being able to do this reliably with your mind towards basically anything, and to make these adjustments to get yourself there. All right, let's take a little break. I'll be right back. If I have any additional little comment before we get into the lecture, I'll include that. But I just need a break for some, to have a little coffee and stuff. But just like 2 or 3 minutes, and then I'll be back. Oh, wrong one. Wrong one. Hold on. Okay, so one other thing I did want to add to this, um, and this is a primarily a Joseph Murphy suggestion, but you'll encounter this everywhere, and really it's a lot of the foundation of when Neville talks about mental diet or Emmett Fox talks about mental diet. So if you really do feel you have assumed this state, your thoughts throughout the day should have already naturally adjusted. If they haven't and you're having to sort of adjust them as you go, that's also fine. But if you really look at the contents of your mind, once the thing is done and manifested out, it's not going to be, for the most part, it's not going to be your primary thought, like your primary reason for being. It's not going to be the thing you're focusing the most on anymore. Even if it is something foundational, like a marriage or like your money or like your health, you're going to be thinking about it very differently. So like when I gave that sofa example, a more apt example is when Joseph Murphy wanted to sell his house, and he discusses this in Power of the Subconscious Mind. You could probably like search the book like house sale and you'll find it. So when he wanted to sell his house, he had imagined for it, he had prayed for it, and he was just not getting any movement. And so he asked himself, if I had already sold the house, because I believe I have, what would I do? And he did take a physical action, okay? And what he did was he removed the for sale sign from the yard in front of his house. And the next day he got movement. I don't know how quickly the sale went through because sales do take a bit, but the next day he got a buyer. So if you look at like if it's something that's really occupying most of your mind and you're very focused on it, and that's probably not going to be how you're thinking about it and how much time and space you're giving to it once it's manifested out. So let's give, for example, you're really focused on, I would just say, like, you're really focused on a relationship right now, with a specific person or not, but you just want this relationship really bad, and you're not really giving as much attention as you should to other aspects of your life. Well, once this relationship is in your life, exactly how you want it to be or better, what then is going to be your predominant focus? Are you mostly going to be then focused on your career? Is there a hobby you're going to spend more time on? Are there activities you're going to do, either with that person or not with that person, that you're not currently doing, that you're currently putting off? Is there even like travel you're delaying or life plans you're delaying because you feel like you want them there to do this with? You have to start doing those things, and you have to do it in faith that if they're like, say you want to go on a trip and you end up having to go without them, you still have to do that because it will signal to yourself. It's a deep signal of faith to yourself that you know this thing is done and assured, and you can now relax in peace and do the things that you would otherwise be doing. Put your focus on the things you would otherwise be focused on. When it comes to a big project, and I've actually been able to apply this successfully towards this stream. Once you're in the midst of it, once you have that focus on your desired end for a given project, it's going to make the day-to-day bits of doing work that you need to do on the project so much easier and more natural. And you're going to notice, like, once you've made that shift, the unfolding just goes so smooth, and you'll probably see some sort of response from the exterior world. But think about how you could apply that to whatever your various situation would be. Like, I know, like, when it comes to, I'm trying to think of another good example here. If one comes to mind, I'll mention it, but the Joseph Murphy house sale one was probably the best. Now, he made the movement physically. He physically removed the sign. However, you could, in mind, remove the sign. And that's what a lot of your imaginal acts are trying to get you to do anyway. So when you do an imaginal act calling to tell a friend that you've got the job, well, that is what you would do in real life. So those sort of movements in mind. Now, you've probably already done a lot of those of your imaginal acts, but there might be one or two that are like this linchpin movement that you haven't done in any way yet, that you need to do. All right, so it's not just about technique, but it's about, have you really included all the components of that state into like your new consciousness? Like, is your consciousness complete? Is it the grain of the mustard seed, or is it like you've got a mixed garden of a bunch of different things, and some of them you don't want growing, some of them are weeds you don't want present. But these are all examinations that, little by little we pick them apart, and you do get there. You do get there. And you just have to have faith that you are already there. All right, let's scoot over to reading. And I think this lecture will also be very, very helpful in this regard. And keep in mind, when I do these, so I do want to connect with people who are at my same level of thinking about the law, applying it, and, people who also need a little bit of help, or someone who is way far beyond this, whatever. I just want to connect with people who already know about the law for the most part. But also, I keep in mind that we are all one entity, and we are all experiencing and discussing this as a unity that perceives itself to be disunity. However, that's a misperception. That's an illusion that we've introduced in order to grow in our creative power. But when I'm doing these, a lot of my big motivation is that I know that I'm going to watch these videos back, and I'm going to need a reminder. And sometimes the reminder should come from me 2 months ago. Sometimes that is exactly the reminder I need that day. Sometimes the reminder should come from another person. It may even come from someone who's not even talking about the law, but the way they talk about something reminds me of a certain mental adjustment I need to do, or something I haven't imagined for that I really need to put in the time and effort and imagine for. So I do these to try to help myself, really. But I know also that if I'm helping you, if I'm helping Cyber King or Campbell or my mom or whoever, that those are all aspects of me too. I just right now don't think that that's me. I think of myself as I'm Kelly and you're Campbell, but I know that we're ultimately the same entity, the same being. The consciousness in me is the same consciousness in you. And Cyber King, if you're around right now, you might be back later, but if you listen to the playback, you'll know, your name, well, my last name is King, but your name is also a version of a joke I have told to one of my best friends many, many times. So, your username is, so perfect and was such an indicator to me that, what I am doing is really helping all the various manifestations of me, But yeah, so let's scoot into, that was a little aside, let's scoot into the lecture, Neville's rant. You can never outgrow I am, from 1969, March 10th, 1969. A man can never outgrow or lose the God he knows in a first-person, present-tense experience. And when he finds this God, he tells his brothers, saying, "If I had not come and spoken to you, you would have no sin. But now you have no excuse for your sins." God reveals himself to man as his eternal contemporary, saying, "Unless you believe that I am he, you will die in your sins." But man finds it almost impossible to keep the tense. He thinks of God in the third person, addresses him in the second person, but can only know God in a first person, present tense experience. Just imagine, no one can sin until God reveals himself to the individual in a first person, present tense experience. Only then can man have no excuse for his sin. And when one who finds God tells his brothers, he receives no greater reception than the first one did, because they see him as a man of flesh and blood, and cannot see this invisible being who says, "I came down from heaven." Man is looking for Christ to come from without, but his revelation is whispered from within. I tell you, I have been crucified with Christ. It is not I who lives, but Christ who lives in me. And the life I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. In that act, he, whose name is I am, became me. And if I do not believe that my I amness is he, I will die in my sin. And of course, Neville's definition of sin is knowing what to do and not moving it. Knowing the movement you should make in mind and not doing it. So our heuristic today is simply, are you living in sin on some of the things that you want and that other people in your life you know that they want. Also, I should have put this at the top, but I'll state it now for people who are watching back the whole lecture. If you don't know specifically what someone wants, you can just imagine. You could just put them into really lovely states. So if you don't really know, like the biggest thing your friend wants right now, you can just imagine them being happy, being fulfilled, being at peace, being healthy, like just in a really great state and telling you that their life is perfect, things like that. And also, I just want to put up a little quick, little. Because we got a little storm going right now, so let me see where the chat box is. Okay, it's up there. We got a little storm going right now, so if I disconnect, it's because I possibly lost power, so I just want to make a little note of that. When asked to identify his Father, he said, "If you knew me, you would not ask. For no man can know me without knowing God, for he and I are one." This is not a physical man speaking to another, but self speaking to self. What child is not aware that he or she is? And to be aware is to say, "I am," the name God revealed to Moses on the mountaintop. All things are possible to God, but man has difficulty keeping the tense. He speaks of God in third person, prays to God in the second person, but can only know God in first person present tense. For I am the Lord thy God, and besides me there is no other God. In the 50th Psalm, these words are put into the mouth of David. Against thee and against thee only have I sinned. Only I, who must know myself in a first person present tense experience, have sinned, and I have only sinned against myself. Do you believe that Jesus Christ is in you as your very self? Are you willing to test yourself? Let me tell you of one lady who did. Many years ago, while living in a rooming house in Brooklyn with very little money, this lady started each day with these words: "I am a very wealthy woman. I have $50,000 in cash." Every Sunday morning she would go to the corner and buy a Sunday Times for her neighbor, Miss Mead, who was a little old lady living frugally and rarely left the house. Within a year after this lady began starting her day claiming her wealth, Miss Mead died, leaving her $50,000 in cash, plus jewelry valued in excess of $30,000. She received an estate of over $100,000 by keeping God in the present tense. Now, that is not the first time also that Neville told an experience that was very similar to this. There was another person, I don't know if it was a man or a woman, but it doesn't really matter. What they had started doing was they lived in I guess it was a nice condo building, and they didn't own their unit, and they really wanted to own a unit, but like a better one than theirs. And so they had imagined just owning one. They didn't imagine the how, they imagined just owning one. We'll find it at some point, and I'll be like, oh, this is the one I was talking about. But they imagined just owning one, and their unfolding was that there was a lady in their building who just didn't have a lot of company and social people to be social with, and this person started cooking her dinners, and I think they had like a weekly dinner, like on the weekends or something. And she either passed or like retired to Florida or something. Like she either passed or moved and left this person her condo, which was way better. Like it was like all luxury and everything, and then the stuff inside it too, which I guess she had like, really, really, high end, expensive furniture as well. So that's not the first time that Neville has told of someone having an unfolding like this. My friend has now found him, and I want all who hear me to find him. For when you find this God, you will never outgrow, and therefore never lose him. For you can never grow outside of self. You may believe in astrology, and outgrowing that belief, you may then believe in tea leaves. Outgrowing that, you will find something else to believe in as you grow and outgrow. Grow and outgrow, but you cannot outgrow the God you find in the first person, present tense. For when you find him to be your I amness, you have found the only God. One day everyone will find him and join their brothers who, already awakened, are in eternity, contemplating this world of death, watching for the little stir of life, watching for the people who get conscious about manifesting, because that's also their very selves. So this whole paragraph right here is really cool because this applies to a lot of people's, everybody's really their spiritual journey. How, and as in the contemporary world, we're going to all experience and everyone has their own individual experience, but for the most part, we're finding a lot of these things through the internet. And so I don't find it unusual that a lot of people will say, oh, well, I started with this and then I went to that. Usually law of attraction is one of the ones that comes right before the law of assumption. So many times I have seen this mirrored where a person was interested in law of attraction first, and then they found usually Neville or someone who's distilling Neville and was like, boom, this is what works. This is what actually works. Now, even if you outgrow the law of assumption, you're not going to outgrow, when Neville says your I am this, he means your consciousness. So really the law of assumption is just a linguistic way of explaining that what your being is claiming as true is true and expresses. You can't outgrow that. That truth, that way that reality operates, is not going to be thwarted unless you do something silly like claim that's not how reality operates. But even then, it's only doing that because you've made that claim. So still, whatever you appropriate and make as true for who you say I am will express. That's not going to change. You're not going to find a belief system that explains things better than that, that captures what's going on here better than that. You're just not going to find it. You're not going to experience it. Now, you may change a lot of your manifesting rules, and that's what we were talking about today, is finding the way of thinking about your creative process that most enables you to express what you want to express, but ultimately yourself is what's doing it. That's not going to change. You're not going to find a power greater than your very self, your very awareness of being. That's the ultimate power. I have been sent to tell you these things, for if I had not come and spoken to you, you would have no sin. You could not miss the mark because you did not have any, but now you have no excuse for missing it. I have revealed God to you in first person, saying, he who sees me sees him who sent me. I was sent by my Father, he whom you call God. Only I know my Father, and you know not your God, for I know that I and my Father are one. He's saying you sent Neville to yourself. Neville is who you sent to tell you your own message. And your message, and it's like your message is that you sent this message to yourself to send this message to yourself. Like it's a very interesting little play that we've concocted here. But yeah, I mean, like the shades of the Matrix and Plato's allegory of the cave, to find out that that's true are really wild. In the first chapter of Colossians, I don't know if it's Colossians or Colossians, Paul tells us, the gospel which you have heard has been preached to every creature under heaven. And in the third chapter of Galatians, he says, the scripture foreseeing that all would be saved through faith, preached the gospel beforehand to Abraham, saying, in you shall all the nations be blessed. In the state of faith called Abraham, we heard the story and then went astray. Falling asleep, we forgot our true identity and worshipped idols. Speaking of God in the third person, and to him in the second person, we have forgotten the God who gave us birth. Yet I tell you, God is eternally contemporary, for he is our awareness of being. I wanted to read this bit again. The scripture foreseeing that all would be saved through faith preached the gospel beforehand to Abraham, saying, "In you shall all the nations be blessed." Now, without faith, it is impossible to please God. And faith does work on this level. Everything you possess was brought into being through faith. And the glory of faith lies in its power to link us to the heavenly realm. Having heard salvation's story, can you have faith in this divine vision, which is the gospel, in the time of trouble? No matter what happens to you, can you center yourself upon the vision? Can you believe that housed within you as your I amness is the only creative power in the world? I hope so, because your faith in God is measured by your confidence in yourself. And this is one of the statements that back in the day got Neville into a lot of trouble amongst religious people, and probably still would today. And it's simply for the reason that Neville has prior explained, in this paragraph and the paragraph before, which is that a lot of people still have faith in an external God. So it insults their belief in the external God to appropriate, to their mind, to arrogantly appropriate the God self. But I say to that, what is more arrogant than thinking you can experience and are experiencing things that God doesn't bother with, that God won't? How arrogant is that? Come on. And if God created everything and all there is was created by God, why would this being remove itself from its creation? Why would it make an external creation and just, let it do its thing? Why? What's the point in that? How do you really know the quality of your work? If you have the ability to experience your work firsthand, you're not going to know the quality of your work unless you descend into it and live through it. When you imagine a state, do you believe that the seen has the power to externalize itself? Or do you feel you must pray to a being on the outside for help? I tell you, there is no being on the outside. The creative power of the world is housed within you now. Sit down and imagine a state of confidence that it must externalize itself. Believe that because all things are possible to imagine, the state you have imagined must become an external fact. This is a great, concise summary of the heuristic I gave prior today. If you don't have faith, simply imagine for it. And if you have not yet applied that faith to the current big thing you want, now is the time. Now is the appointed hour. Let go of sin and appropriate the thing you want in consciousness. Totally. Stop asking where is it. It's within you. You already claimed it. I have tried this time and time again, and it has always proved itself in performance. Now I share this knowledge with everyone who will listen. How many believe my words and put them into practice, I do not know. I only know that man finds it hard to keep the tense. Religious leaders speak of God in the third person as if he were on the outside. Yet I tell you, he comes from within. When Moses heard the words, "I am, has sent me unto you," it seemed to come from without, yet it was whispered from within. There is no evidence of an historical Jesus Christ. We have the essence of Christ, but not a historical one. The being within me that is speaking is the Christ, but that which is talking to you is only a garment. Everyone knows its background. Its parents are known, its physical brothers, and its limitations. Yet the being wearing this garment of flesh came out from God, who is my Father, for I am from above. The body I wear is from below. I am in the world, but not of it, for the being who awoke within me is the one speaking to you now. It is not the same being who entertains guests in our home or enjoys dining in a good restaurant, for this being is not in any way a part of this world. This is the being in you that I am trying to reach tonight, trying to stir and awaken to return to the one grand I am. Believe me when I tell you the only purpose in life is to discover who you are. Against thee, O Lord, and thee only have I sinned. In other words, I've only ever injured myself. I've only ever hurt myself. Addressing him in the second person as against thee, he realizes the Lord is within them. that he is the eye of man who inspired the prophets to write what they did. Having conceived the play and coming out from the Father to play it, I must fulfill what I foretold I would do, and I will. I think this is so powerful. So many people look everywhere for the purpose of life. The meaning is personal, and you get to define the meaning. But the purpose is the same for everybody, which is to remember this and learn to create consciously on the level of the Father so that you can ascend out of the world of death in which you are imprisoned now. By design, by your own design. Like, this is a remix reality. You're here to learn how to mostly discard unwanted things. That is mostly what you're teaching yourself how to do. Christianity is based upon the affirmation that a certain series of supernatural events happened in which God revealed himself in action for the salvation of man. I have experienced every one of these events. As each event took place, I recorded the date in my Bible, even to a simple little one like, "What you must do, do quickly." Against that statement, I marked the date of October 10th, 1966, where I had been preaching to a group of 12 men, all seated on the floor, when one man jumped up and departed quickly. Then a man dressed in costly robes entered, approached me, and unveiled my arm, revealing the arm of the Lord. But the one who revealed it moved quickly, as that simple statement dictated. That's weird. And Neville had a lot of the. I guess this must have been a dream. Neville had a lot of these experiences, and he claims here that he took detailed notes of all of them. There was another lecture I was reading earlier today where he said the same thing, and it was because of his notes that he knew that a certain aspect of the promise was literal. And it's a pretty incredible thing, and if you're someone who has started to have mystical experiences as a result of finding Neville, you might want to include, and I have done it by recording a lot of my dreams, you might want to also catalog the dates and details of these experiences alongside your desires and manifestations. Because even something that, so a lot of times you may have a dream that you don't understand now, but in 2 months you're going to come across a Neville lecture that you may even have the exact same dream, or he explains the symbolism. The bones and dust one that I had talked about, I guess I had that dream like 2 or 3 weeks ago now. It's actually in the Easter lecture where he says what the bones are. The bones are the law of assumption. The bones are simply what you have assumed to be true. And that's how the world is framed, by the law of assumption. Those are the bones. So that's very interesting. And I found that about a week or 2 weeks after I had the dream. But the dust, that's another one that, since I had the dream, I'd obviously read it in Neville lectures before, but since I had the dream, it has come up in 2 lectures where he specifically said everything here is dust. And now I know that, and I know that in a deeper way. Like, if I had just read that, and I probably did read it 2 years ago, I would have been like, I don't know what this guy's talking about. He's a little bit wild. He's definitely crazy. And now I'm like, oh, I know what you mean. I've seen the dust. I know what you mean. No one can see it because it's so infinitely small. It's spiritual. There's no oh my God. There's no microscope that man could ever conceive of, even divine man could ever conceive of, that would allow you to see these grains of dust. But they are there, and they are creating everything. They're smaller than the tiniest subparticle that we've discovered times infinity. You will not reveal them on this level of reality, but they are there. And when Neville talks about the incurrent eyes, you have access to the incurrent eyes in terms of your imagination and your dreams, always. So Neville talks about divine versions of incurrent eyes that are like better, and you might give them to someone or receive them from someone in a dream. I gotta disagree with him. You have them all the time, but not on this level of reality. You really need to lose yourself in an imaginal act, really go deep into meditation, or be dreaming. But when you do, you have the incurrent eyes. That means you can see the spiritual aspect of this reality. Now, someone like William Blake claimed to have visions in his normal day to day. And it's also pretty interesting because I recently saw an interview with a lady who received the promise, and she had a vision during her waking life. So it is possible to have them then, but that's not constrained. Like, in other words, you always have access to it in dream and in imagination. You can access them. Just in your day-to-day life, you're not necessarily going to be able to see the real reality, like the foundation of reality you put in place. But you will start revealing it to yourself, showing it to yourself as you keep going. Like, there's little revelations along the way. The promise is the big one, but all these little dreams that Neville recorded, they're part of it. And it's kind of wild because when I found Neville, it was just things I wanted, just experiences, states of being, material things I wanted. And I literally even said, I don't want this. I don't want to be the guy who's like talking about the Bible and having visions. That is not what I really want to do with my life. And now here I am, hello internet, telling you about my crazy dreams. Just because once you have the experience, you can't deny it. And Neville even says that, once you tested the law and known it to be true, he said it in this lecture, you have to tell others. That's the point. That's the point. And because, out of the 1,000 people you tell, the one who it really clicks with, that's why you're telling it. Because you're identifying that other aspect of self that is waking up and really using their creative power. Okay, the words... also, you're going to know straight away when it's someone who is not ready. And you just let them go about their way. I've had 2 experiences recently where I normally would have kept my mouth shut, but I just said something, and it would just, they were clearly not interested. And, who cares? Who cares? It's not their time. They're not ready for that yet. Let them stay asleep. You have to let them sleep. Just leave them alone. Let them be. Okay. The words of the Lord recorded in the red letter edition of the Bible will be fulfilled by you. Whether he quotes the Old Testament or relates it to you, or relates to it, you are predestined to fulfill the red letters recorded there. I don't know what this red letter edition of the Bible is. Daphne might know. She might have one in her Bible collection. The entire drama has unfolded in me, so I know the perfect pattern that God sent into the world. We are told the first shall be last and the last first. In the story, the last act is recorded as the crucifixion, yet it is the first. That's kind of interesting because I guess I thought it would be the resurrection, which is the promise. But let's just go with it. I have been crucified with Christ. It is not I who live, but Christ who lives in me. And the life I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loves me and gave himself for me by actually becoming me. His name is I Am. That's the Lord God Jehovah, who is Christ. He is God the Father who became you. His death, in the sense of complete forgetfulness as to his true identity and belief that he is actually you, is your life. It is this being who tells you, unless I die, thou canst not live, but if I die, I shall rise again, and thou with me. He rose in me. He proved that he could die and rise. For when he rose, I rose, knowing I am he. He became me in the most intimate way by becoming my awareness. Then he talked to me and revealed himself to me from within my very self. In the beginning, the words seemed to come from another, as though someone on the outside had spoken them. Yet they were whispered from within, as everything said of Jesus Christ unfolded in me. Also, if you want to have, I have only done it definitely once, but maybe other times. What he's talking about here is what Reverend Ike talks about when he talks about angels, which they are like the highest possible conceivable thoughts. And So, I mean, obviously, your awareness of being is infinite, right? And so it contains infinity from within infinity. You know, it is all to all. There is an aspect of it that is the divine power, you know, that Neville talks about when he was um, clothed in his body became the body of love, or when the dove descended upon him. Those sort of moments where you get to experience the true nature of it, like the infinite ocean of golden liquid light. Neville's first experience, my first experience. Those moments of deep intimacy and connection with your true self are, I believe, what he is talking about here. Now, when it comes to language, you can invoke that. Um, the way I did it was I was genuine but also demanding. And so I literally demanded word revelation within me of who I actually am and what transpired. I also feel like incredibly, like, because I'm in my conscious normal mind right now, feel incredibly not embarrassed, but like self-conscious about revealing this on the internet to whoever wants to hear it. But so I demanded it. I wanted to know, what does my true self think? What does my true, like, I wanted to know the thoughts, the words of my true self. And what followed was about an hour of, it's still an inner monologue. You're not hearing a voice. Like, I didn't hear some kind of heavenly intense voice, but all my thoughts shifted. And they were really the most, here's the thing that I think a lot of people need to understand. You're going to get a different expression of it, but it wasn't light. It wasn't like light and airy and kind of, you know, fartsy, love everything. No, no, no. It was like, it was not a hippie. It was, you know what I'm saying? Like, it was a very forceful, extremely forceful presence. Like, really not antagonistic, but very strong, intensely strong, intense total power. But like, there was no restraint in any of the declarations, and it just was things like, you know, I am infinite and absolute power forever and ever. Those type of declarations, but they were so unrestrained, that like they were nothing at all like my normal thoughts. We dwell so much upon limitation that these thoughts were in a way totally alien to me. And you know, recently when we read Walter Lanyon talks about doing this as a conscious challenge. His conscious challenge in the book we read was to live one whole day, just one day, and the whole day allow no thoughts of limitation. You could also include lack in that. Don't limit your mind, your conception of yourself, your experience of reality in any way. Live a totally unlimited day. And that is what these thoughts were. They were unlimited. They were unlimited. They were absolute. They were just so incredibly powerful. They were really nothing at all like my day-to-day thoughts. But you can have that experience if you want. The way you do it might be different. For you, it might be getting quiet and being meditative about it. It might be being in a particularly sort of happier state where you're allowing it. For me, I was antagonistic, demanded it. I demanded it. I demanded to experience an expression of God's word in me. And I did, and it was crazy. It was crazy. It was a wild experience. And it was such a wild experience because my inner monologue is not that. Like, my inner monologue is still, for the most part, being a person and having a certain set of what I believe to be problems and what I believe to be a past, and trying to figure out how to apply the law in my day-to-day life. It's not statements like, I invented time. Like, it's not those kind of things. But that's what it was for that hour. And it was about an hour. But it was an hour of not having any of my normal thoughts. It was just these thoughts. And it was really wild. And at the end of it, I felt a sort of calm and peace that I haven't had like for almost forever, like almost ever as a person, other than when I was really, really doing a lot of deep relaxation exercises about a year before. Because after I had the experience, I just like had a really, really deep, peaceful sleep. And that is one of the greatest blessings. All right, that was a super aside, but I just want to include that because if someone is watching this back and knows what he's talking about and has had your experience of it, I want to reveal that that's not unusual. Like this is like it. You can label it as crazy because it's so out of the norm. It's so out of the box for what you normally experience. But I experienced it, and if you experienced it too, yeah, this is the thing that happens. And Neville talked about it in was this 1969 or 1968. You know that he gave this lecture. So it's something that's actually normal. Okay. Can you accept my words and keep the tense? I mean, it seems to be in this lecture, he's encouraging you to have that train of thought all the time, you know? Can you accept my words and keep the tense? It is so very important to do so. For if you turn to the second person or the third, you have created a false God and a false Jesus Christ. Do you not realize that Jesus Christ is in you? For unless you believe that your I amness is he, you will die in your sins. Put the little word is in the sentence. Unless you believe that I am is he, you die in your sins. To give it meaning, for without it you may think of being on the outside as speaking, and keeping you from missing the mark. If you want to be rich, and do not believe that you are the cause of wealth, then you will go on missing the mark by remaining poor. The true goal is to know God is your own wonderful human imagination. This God you will never lose, for when he reveals himself within you, it is a first-person, present tense experience. So here you have generally an encouragement to never externalize your power, to never believe that there is some condition, circumstance, person who is going to act in a way against what you have assumed, or to think that there is some other person or ritual or, you know, there's nothing outside of yourself that's going to get you what you want. It's only your own imagination, your own consciousness that is going to deliver to you what you desire. In the unfolding, people will tell you that they had thoughts, that they had urgings, that they had other motivations, but those were all happening only to conform to what you've imagined. So it's just simply a reminder not to abdicate your power. Whether your manifestation is good or bad, don't give your power away. Don't believe that something outside of you has the force to interfere with the only power. As God unfolds himself within you, he doesn't call himself God, but I am. It was I who awoke and rose in that tomb. No one else was there. I had no help getting out. He's talking about a vision of the promise here. I pushed the stone away myself, and when I looked back to see that out of which I came, I saw the three witnesses as recorded in Genesis. I think he saw his brothers. This is, I don't know if he experienced this as the second or the third, but it's usually the second or probably the second vision of the promise. I saw the three witnesses as recorded in Genesis. It is said that Abraham, the state of faith in which I started, was seated by the door of his tent in the heat of the day when the three men appeared. As one spoke concerning the child, Abraham knew he was the Lord. That child is Isaac, which means he laughs. It also means laughter or laughing. I know because we had a storm called Isaac years ago, and I like looking up I've always liked looking up the meaning of names. I found that promised child. I think he means like Simon. Like Simon, I took that promised child in my arms, and he laughed. Simon is hearing. So who is Christ, and who is the Lord? Did Scripture not fulfill itself in me? I have come only to fulfill Scripture, and this I have done. I know I am the temple of the living God, for my body was torn from top to bottom. I found my Son, he who was set up in the beginning to reveal me as the Father. This is not what the priesthoods teach, but I am telling you what I have experienced. For I have found David. He cried unto me, Thou art my Father. And David, of course, if anyone reads Neville's lectures or listens to mine, will know that David is the child of man. He is all the experiences of humanity condensed and birthed into one individual, the eternal youth David. And seeing David is the third vision of the promise. And no matter your current sex, gender, identity, David, when he sees you, will call you Father. I do not care what the priesthoods of the world may say. I am telling you what I know from experience. If they do not believe in me, they will continue to live in sin by worshiping a false god. All the priesthoods and rabbis worship an idol, for the true God cannot be worshipped in any tense other than the present. His name is I Am. No picture on a wall or statue in a garden is the Lord. Make no graven image unto me. If you do not see him as yourself, you will not find him. And when he comes, he reveals himself through his Son, calling you Father. This you set up in the beginning, and then you agree to play all the parts. Not one part can you condemn, for all contribute to the end when you find God. The goal of life is to find him not on the outside, but within yourself, in the first person present tense. The world thinks I am insane when I tell them who I am. For they see the garment of flesh I wear and know I am subject to all its weaknesses. But because the drama of the Scripture has unfolded within me, I know how true Scripture is. I cannot describe the joy that is yours when you awaken. I can only say that the world into which I go night after night is entirely different. And earth does not contain anything which I can use as an image to describe that world. I return through darkness into this world every day to share my experiences with everyone who will listen, while some believe me and some do not. My most intimate friends may not believe me, for they know and judge me by my human weaknesses. My brothers, knowing we were sired by the same father and came out of the same mother's womb, his actual brothers, cannot believe my experiences are related to Scripture. But I am not asking you to believe in Neville, but to believe in God, who is your own wonderful human awareness. This is really interesting here. This is some indication that his dreams changed either after receiving the promise or at some point in his awakening, and that you'll experience the same change. Like the world into which I go night after night is entirely different. Earth does not contain anything which I can use as an image to describe that world. That's very interesting, because most of my dreams, even if it's abstracted, not always, but 95%, 90% of the time, the imagery in the dream is still some creation or recreation of what you could experience here. Though, I've definitely experienced places, objects, entities, though I mostly see people in dreams who are not of this earth. They're alien in terms of experience. Usually that's environments or the organization of environments, like the physics of the environment are very alien. But yeah, most of my dream imagery is still and has pretty much always been something earthly, And what's really interesting is it is mostly people. Like it is probably like 95%. The other characters in dreams are people. Not even usually animals. They're usually all people, which is interesting. I have been sent to tell you who God is. But I'm just saying this is remarkable because apparently that's going to change. If you've received the promise or if you're awakened. And if you have and have that experience and want to share in the comments or send it to me in email, please let me know. imaginationstream@gmail.com. If your dreams have shifted to be totally otherworldly since receiving the promise or having other mystical experiences, I'd love to hear about that. That sounds really cool. I have been sent to tell you who God is. He who sent me is one with me, for although he seemed to be another when I stood in his presence, when we embraced, we fused and became one. This is what I was talking about just like 20 minutes ago. The recording angel, the ledger, the being of love who embraced me is within. In the beginning, I foreknew myself. Through foreknowledge, I was predestined to be called from the world of death, called from within myself by an infinite being of love, wearing the human form divine, to be embraced and sent. And the moment we embraced, we fused, and I knew myself to be infinite love. There had been a seeming separation when I entered a world that was not mine, to experience all of its horrors, until its end when I am called, acquitted, justified, and glorified. Justified, as far as I understand it, from other, it's probably, I don't know how it would be different from acquitted. I haven't seen that mentioned before, but justified, and I think we've done justified states, is about a total forgetfulness of any act which is not. It's like a distillation of experience that expunges any horrors on the total consciousness of God. Like you experience it here on earth, whatever the horrific or terrible thing was, but once it's justified, it's expunged. It doesn't exist anymore. It's like erased from eternity. You can actually do that with revision towards yourself or other people on this level of reality. Now there is nothing left for me to do but to tell it to everyone who will listen, and urge them to set their entire hope upon this grace, which is coming to all at the unveiling of Christ in each individual in the first person present tense. While you are here, you can become independently secure, certainly. All of these things are possible to you, but the real objective in your life is to find God, the cause of all life. To believe in God does not aid you. The question is, do you believe in yourself? Can you believe you are rich when you have no money? Can you continue to believe it throughout the day and fall asleep night after night as though you were? If you will become rich. Well, there's now succinct advice on how to become rich right there for anyone who's looking for it. Hopefully I'll remember to parse this out. I'll state it again. The question is, do you believe in yourself? Can you believe you are rich now when you have no money? Can you continue to believe it throughout the day and fall asleep night after night, that's persistence, as though you were? If you will become rich. You can replace rich with anything, and that's it right there. That's all the advice you need, really. Then fulfill another desire and then another, and one day you will discover the one who made it possible. That one is God. Millions of people claim to believe in God in the third person, but they do not know God. Only when God reveals himself in the first person present tense can he be known. That God cannot be outgrown or lost, for you cannot outgrow I am. I am is the theme of the book of John, which goes back to the 3rd chapter of the book of Exodus, the 14th verse, as, "Go say, I am has sent me to you. As a man, I am revealing God's true name. But those who hear my words know the outer garment I wear and judge it. They know my weaknesses, but they do not know the Lord. I tell you, when you know the Lord, or rather are known by him, you'll experience a thrill that is beyond description. Your shock will turn to joy, however, as the drama of one called Jesus Christ unfolds within you." I want to see how much is left, because I'm getting a little bit... Oh, geez. This is a pretty long lecture. In the meantime, you can test him in the world of Caesar. There is no limit to his power, so take that power which became you and attach it to your desire. Sleep every night, so attach your desire that you feel its reality, and in no time you will prove my words. Within a year, the lady in New York received her $50,000, pressed down and running over. She knew exactly what she did, and would never have guessed that the little old lady she bought the paper for every Sunday morning would be used as the means to give her the wealth she claimed. This lady has found God. yet she is still inclined to speak of him in the third person. Man is in the habit of thinking of God as not and not as God. Man is in the habit of thinking of God and not as God. It is so easy to forget and to keep the tense. Every good, well-trained Jew is familiar with the first 5 books of the Old Testament. They have read the book of Exodus many times and believe God is the great I am, yet they still think of him in the third person. They would think that anyone who boldly stood up and proclaimed, I am he, was arrogant, yet I tell you that is the only way you will ever find God. But when he comes, there is no need to brag about it. You know who you are, and when they call you by your earthly name, you respond. Perhaps you will have to dinner together, but they will continue to be totally unaware of the being within you. And you don't always throw pearls before swine, because they are not prepared to receive them. You will join their party and enjoy the evening as you let the outer man play his part. But you know the inner man, the one they know not of. That man is Jesus Christ. And take one little break just because I need to just take a break because all the reading starting to give me a little bit of headache. I'll be back in maybe 5 to 10 minutes, and we'll finish up the lecture. We haven't got too much, but we do have a little bit. I need a break because my head's starting to hurt a little bit, but I will be back. I will finish it. And for anyone who's watching the replay, you can look at the timeline and be able to skip ahead. All right, I'll be right back. All right, back. I just had to stop talking for 10 minutes because talking like that sometimes aggravate headaches, talking endlessly for almost 2 hours. So, but I have enough, feeling better, so totally fine to finish out this lecture and maybe talk a little more afterwards. Okay, so there's only one Christ. Everyone has been crucified with that one Christ. Everyone who has been crucified, it doesn't say that, but everyone who has been crucified with that one Christ can make the statement, it is not I who live, but Christ who lives in me. And the life I now live in this body of flesh and blood, I live by the faith of the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. God actually became as you are, that you may rise to the one being called God the Father. As one power, we came down from God to become the gods. In order to descend in power and play these parts, we had to enter complete forgetfulness, which Neville, of course, earlier in this lecture, equated to God's death. The actor cannot pretend. This is a method acting we're all doing here. He must enter and become the part he has agreed to play. He cannot step upon the stage knowing he is a great actor who everyone recognizes. He must lose himself in the character by leaving his personality in the dressing room and entering the stage as the character he is to portray. So when God stepped upon the stage wearing this, he is Neville, 100%. He had to completely forget that he was God, yet knowing that he brought with him a pattern which would erupt and his memory would return. I agreed to play the part as Neville. He and I are one, but I am greater than he. And I think when he says I am greater than he means that God is greater than the part of Neville. If you want to know more, I'm pretty sure for Neville's birthday, I don't know if I put it on YouTube or if it's still on the, it should be on YouTube. It might still be in the VODs on here. The one for Neville's birthday talks a lot more about the pattern. We either did Neville's purpose revealed, fulfillment of God's plan, or the pattern man. All of those lectures have a more detailed description of the pattern that Neville is describing here. The promise is part of the pattern, but some of these other smaller revelations and experiences are also part of that pattern that we created for ourselves. So again, those lectures would be Neville's purpose revealed, fulfillment of God's plan, and the pattern man. Look upon Jesus Christ as a pattern. I have told you how the pattern erupted in me in the hope that you will believe me. Although a few believe my words, the majority disbelieve, fulfilling Scripture. He came unto his own, and his own believed him not. What I tell you and what you are capable of conceiving may be entirely different. Can you receive what I tell you as my own personal experience? I can tell you that Scripture is true from beginning to end, but can you believe me enough to set your hope fully upon the grace that is coming to you at the unveiling of God within you? I hope so, for God is in you as your I am. And when he awakes, you go through a series of supernatural events called Jesus Christ. Then you will tell your experience to those who will listen in the hope that they will accept them. But it does not matter if they do or do not. For in the end, you take off your garment of flesh and return to an intimacy that is indescribable. Eyes have not seen or ears heard the things that are already prepared for you. In that world, you are in control of everything, and everything is alive. Every night, I pass beyond the world of dream to enter the world of reality. And I return each morning through the world of dream to re-enter this world of death. This I do night after night and will continue to do until that moment in time when it pleases the depth of my own being, who is the Father, to take off this garment of flesh and call it a day. This is really interesting. I have not, again, this is something I haven't encountered in the Neville lectures before. Like, he talks about, unusual dreams he's had. But he didn't he didn't reveal that actually those experiences are not earthly, so there's no comparable imagery or experience in this world to relate them to. And he's saying here, He passes beyond the world of dream to enter the world of reality. So he's dwelling within imagination when he sleeps. And I don't know, maybe he'll say later in the lecture when that started for him or in another lecture. But that is not something that he was specific about in any other lecture that I've read before. I forgot, or at the time wasn't keen to what he was saying. But that's really interesting. That he wasn't, after a certain point, he wasn't dreaming anymore. He was totally in a world of imagination. That's really wild. Remember, you can only sin against that self of you who is God. And any time you think of God in any tense other than the first person present, you're entertaining an idol, no matter what you call it. If you leave this auditorium tonight conscious of being God, you are walking in the knowledge of the true God, and all things are possible to you. Walk in complete trust that things are as you want them to be. This is loyalty to unseen reality. This is faith. There are only two things that displease God. One is lack of faith in I am He, and the other is eating of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. We'll see if he talks more about how he's going to explain that. But it's essentially judgment of things in the world, putting them in a moral context or dichotomy that God does not do. And the lack of faith in I am is simply thinking that what you imagine is not going to express, and that your consciousness is not the only power. That's pretty simple. And this is one of the great little concise segments in Neville here of how to manifest anything you want. Walk in complete trust that things are as you want them to be. This is loyalty to unseen reality. This is faith. That's interesting too. One is lack of faith in I am He, and the other is eating of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. We'll see if he explicates that a little bit further. Before descending into the land of forgetfulness, you made yourself a promise that one day your memory would return and you would realize that you were creator of it all, for God gave you Himself. He actually became you, as told in the story of Melchizedek. Melchizedek. I've never heard that name before. He had no father, no mother, no beginning, and no end. In the end, you become a priest after the order of Melchizedek, knowing the whole vast universe was created by and sustained by you. I mean, it's got to be a biblical figure, but I've never heard of it. Now, this is really incredible. I recently read that the great Einstein said, I rejoice in the discovery of the uniformity of the laws of nature and whoever is behind it that we call the Lord. But that man should survive the disintegration of the brain is to me is unthinkable. If a man as wonderful as Einstein feels that the story of the gospel is unthinkable, then condemn no one. You can't deny Einstein's greatness. He was tender, kind, and sincere, but in spite of that gentility, he was quite satisfied to dwell in the uniformity of laws of nature and whoever is behind it. I tell you, there is one behind it all. In other words, he did believe, he externalized that power. He believed in God, but an external God. I tell you, there is one behind it all. He so loved you, he became you, and the day is coming when you will know that you are he. You will know that you are not the creation of the city, but its creator. You are not the maid, but the maker. Whether you are male or female, you are the emanation of the Lord, yet his wife till the sleep of death is past. Then you will awake to know you never left your heavenly home. You were never born and never die, save in your dreams. Man, this last paragraph, I feel like, is one of these things that when people are talking about using the law and trying to distill it and trying to give you helpful assumptions in order to do that, leaving this out is really, it really robs you of something in terms of the magnitude and depth and breadth of this message of what you're telling yourself through Neville. Like, you are not the maid but the maker. Whether you're male or female, you're emanation of the Lord, yet his wife till the sleep of death The sleep of death is past. You will never left your heavenly home. You were never born and never die, save in your dreams. Because I mean, let's kick it over to chat time. Let me turn off the have your breakthrough thing, but we might reference that again. Because look, when most people are talking about the law, they're still approaching me to say, well, there are things I want in my life. Well, can it be life if you are dead and you are just golden liquid light animating dust and bones? Can you really call that life? Like, we talk about our lives, our life, but if this, projection is just that, it's just really a little a box of sand to shape things in. Like, calling it life and thinking of it that way, thinking of it, it's putting the importance on it. It's making that, having faith in that over having faith in your imagination, making that the power that you're competing against. I actually have a relevant thought to this. Circumstances. There's something that I think gets lost when you have, I guess just say non-spiritual or aspiritual explanations of the law that you can't, because the law is unseen, you can never say it's aspiritual. But when people are talking about using the law from a mindset that is based in cause and effect and biased towards the exterior world and what you can do with it, this is lost because the message that you are God is left out. Maybe it's stepped down, it's degraded into you are the God of your reality, but it's like, no, I am is the reality. So why circumstances don't matter, why whatever you're trying to change is not a big deal, it's because it is your creation. It was something you made prior, whether you remember or not, whether you now claim responsibility or not. It is your creation, and it is your duty. It's what you came here to do, to descend into it and learn how to recreate it. Learn how, if it's something you don't want, to dissolve it, to consume it in the flames of your imagination and replace it with the arrangement of the world of your preference. One thing that I've been thinking about that I'd like to do with this stream, because I've done it personally in my journals, but once more people start flowing into here, we could do it maybe in an interactive way, like maybe while I'm playing games or something. It would be nice to have sort of a collaboration with people who are consciously minded when it comes to your imagination, to start deciding, well, let's look at the world we're in. Well, we've had enough of that. We know we don't necessarily like this world, and I mean the world at large. What are the major shifts we would like to see happen? How would they come about? Like doing some essentially collaborative imaginal acts where we can say, well, global warming and the death of our species and the most rapid species extinction in recorded history of Earth, probably not a great thing. What would the world be like if we were instead entering a new era of ecological balance, and we were actually discovering new species that we didn't even know about before, and species that were considered extinct were now thriving in the wild instead of dying in captivity? What would that world be like? Could get into some little solar punk role play in the chat and see if we come up with sort of a scene we really like. Just some ideas that we like, some little stories that we can start telling ourselves mentally about this new world we're experiencing. Because I feel like that is a untapped possibility when it comes to the creative and collaborative use of imagination. Of course, it's done all the time in movies, but what's the dominant subgenre in science fiction? Well, it's dystopia. Dystopic movies have been trending for quite a bit. And of course, I'm experiencing that because that is where I placed my focus. I read dystopic novels as a kid. I saw them externalized in terms of my actual lived reality. and then saw more and more and more and more and more of those movies. And then they ended up externalizing. Well, let's start telling each other and talking to each other visions of utopia, because the dystopic world I've manifested is so deeply dystopic that when you try to talk to people about utopia, one thing that was brought up to me by a friend of mine who's quite clever is like, oh, well, even the word utopia is ironic because it's impossible. And he cited, I guess, the guy who coined the word, and it was coined in an ironic context to explain that utopia is not possible for humans. But, if the kingdom of heaven is within you, you can certainly project it just as easily as you could project any other thing. So it would be fun to collaborate on that with other people, see what kind of visions we could come up with, and see how quickly they externalize and replace what is already present. Because that's what we're supposed to be learning how to do, right? So you start with your personal life, and then you start, well, actually, like when we talked to Daphne, she's kind of started with bigger world things and found that, they're just as malleable, right? So it would be fun to work on some of those things together, see what kind of things we could achieve together. I just want to do a quick, before I sign off, do a quick little recap of the heuristic I talked about today. And, Neville summarized it pretty simply in the lecture. We just did, which is to simply walk in faith, to remain in the consciousness of already being that's what you desire to be. But so my suggestion when it comes to doing this practically as a regular part of your imaginal activity is when it's something really large you want. If you know the ways that you manifest successfully. If you want to make adjustments to those, you can. Just imagine they're different. But when it comes to those big things that you feel haven't manifested yet for yourself and for other people, look at them. Have you actually applied your best and most effective current ways of using your mind towards this thing? And start picking apart little ways, little thoughts, little sneaky thoughts you have throughout the day that are not in the state of you having what you want, and apply your imaginal activity towards those as well. To give an example, and I gave some examples earlier, but like I said, making imaginal purchases. When you start thinking you don't have money, purchase the thing in mind. When you start thinking this person doesn't want to talk to you, mentally receive a text or some other form of communication from them. When you think, well, but I want them to live with me, they live across the planet or whatever, imagine them here at home with you now, today. When it comes to job, throughout the day, when you're in the job you don't want, thinking about the job you do want, put yourself mentally in that other office, or if it's an office, or if it's working from home, think about what you would be doing in your new job. Start mentally adjusting yourself to that reality. I really love inner conversations because, I know I do this. If you look at your mind, I'm sure you've been doing it too. We do a lot of rehearsing. Well, I do. I do a ton of rehearsing in my mind of like stock questions that people could ask me. So if you're friends, they'd be like, hey, so what's been going on with you? When you meet someone new at a party or some kind of gathering, they might ask, what do you do for a living? Meet someone who finds you cute, they might ask, are you in a relationship, right? These are all questions that we sort of prepare for. Like before we have a meeting with someone, no matter what our relationship, we anticipate the sort of things that we're going to talk about and the sort of ways the person might talk about it. All you're doing in order to attain your desired states is when you're having those conversations, start having them as if the thing you desire is already done. So when your friend asks you, hey, what's been going on with you? You tell them about your recent successes, about your new job, that you're very happy in your current relationship, that you're finally making the amount of money you want to make, that you're in, you feel in total perfect health, you feel at peace in general in your life, that whatever things you want to adjust, start telling your friend that. When this lustful person asks you if you're in a relationship, you say, I'm married, show them the ring. When someone asks you, what do you do for a living? If you are currently an accountant and you want to be executive director of mustard seeds, you start rehearsing, telling this imaginary person wanting to know what your job is, oh, I am the executive director of mustard seed distribution. Because we're doing these things all the time anyway. I tend to especially do them when it comes to catching up with friends. So I will, even before I've confirmed that I've, of course, manifested several lunches this way, I'll think about a friend who I don't see often, but I'll think of them coming to town and we go to lunch, and they'll start asking me what's going on in my life. And since finding Neville, I've started just really, upping those, just trying to make those less tied to current circumstances and more into an ideal reified end. And by that I mean specifically, if there is a project I'm working on that I feel isn't going anywhere, I'm not going to try to play it off like, yeah, I started on this thing, but it's not really working out into oh, I have a stream now and it's going really great, have a lot of viewers, it's starting to make money, I really enjoy it, blah, blah, blah. Or, oh man, I've done this book I've been working on for years. I'm starting to edit it. I'm really proud of it. I can't wait until the final copy is ready. How much do you charge for art? If depending on the friend I'm thinking of, how much would you guys charge for a book cover? Might be one of the things I start thinking about. And so just making these adjustments in your normal imaginal acts. And then also noticing, because if you start looking at your life, there are certain people you tend to talk to about certain things. So if there's a person you're always talking to about relationships, when you start planning scenes about your desired relationship status, have those imaginal conversations with that friend. If there's a friend who you guys are more business associates, and so they're always asking you how your business or how your job is going, start having the imaginal conversations with them about your business and job. Just to sort of play to what your natural, already expressed reality is. But yeah, to summarize the heuristic, just have you applied your best, most effective, known effective imaginal techniques, aspect of mind to the thing you want. If you have, and you have been doing it persistently, consistently, for quite amount of time, and you really feel you've captured that state, there has to be a movement in mind of acceptance, of true knowing it is done, knowing that this is a fact now. You're married now, you have the job now, you're wealthy now, you're healthy now, you're happy now, you're fulfilled now. Not tomorrow, not next month when you might get it, not next year when maybe it'll happen. Now. You're an accomplished whatever now. Pianist, author, mustard seed distributor, whatever it is your desired occupation is, you're an accomplished one of them. Now, that feeling. Because that feeling is what you're going to be yearning for all through that career anyway. There's a certain career you want a certain degree of accomplishment in it. There's a feeling there in that accomplishment that you're going for. Pull that into your present sense of self. And I guarantee, because I know I'm going to experience it, what's going to happen is your career is going to speed up. You'll start to see that movement that would have taken you 10 or 20 years, it will take you less than a decade in terms of degree of accomplishment in that field. All right, so that is that. I mean, man, it's been a long one today. This will be quite a trial to cut up because there's a lot of clips in here to cut up for YouTube. But I hope that has been helpful for people, and I especially hope that at least one person out there who has been yearning for that breakthrough on the big thing is able to feel the acceptance and have the manifestation of the thing they want as a result of listening to something I've said here. And hell, I really hope that I'm one of those, that I'm among that number that when I listen back to this, it clicks with me right now. And do that exercise. Do the whole thing I told you to do. Do it now. Go through your past journals. See what the best ways to manifest are for you. And be honest with yourself if you've applied those to the things you really want and the things that the people you love really, truly want. All right, when I close it out, I'm going to play a little bit of a Neville lecture. I think it's called The Immortal Man. I'll post a link to it if someone wants to look it up. And Yeah, that's about it for today. I'll be back on Thursday around 6 or 7. Might be that time might be different depending on if I have to do errands that day because we have like storms now. But either way, there'll be another lecture up before Saturday. All right, so everybody have a great night. Thank you for tuning in, and I'm gonna kick it over to Neville now.
I think you'll find this a very practical night. So I must incorporate certain things that I might have missed through the years. I tell you this because a very dear friend of ours, he's not here tonight, because had he known that I was closing on the last lecture night, which is tonight, rather than the last Friday in the month, he would have been here. But he said, I'm greatly disturbed over something you said just about 2 weeks ago. And that is about the ranks, the heavenly ranks. And he said, I will not give up my divine right, my power, to anyone. I will not make others little that I may seem to myself superior. Now he said, I might have misunderstood you. And I wish you would answer this from your platform. And I will get a tape from someone and hear your answer to my question. Where I spoke of the ranks, the spiritual ranks. I will not retract one word. But he failed to see the difference between the individual and the state in which that individual was for that moment. There's a vast difference between states and the immortal you. The immortal man is God. Man is all imagination. And God is man and exists in us and we in him. The eternal body of man is the imagination, and that is God himself. God is playing all the parts. God alone acts and is in existing beings or men. There's only one actor in the world. There's only one author, and that is God. And that God of whom I speak is your own wonderful human imagination. That is the operant power in the world. If I speak of your God, the chances are you will think of an existent someone outside of yourself. But if I speak of your imagination, I am certain you will think only of yourself. Well, that is the God of whom I speak, playing all the parts. And the lowest part is the multiple tongues. You're not a linguist, but all speaking our language. 200 million of us find it difficult to understand each other because we are moving towards a prejudice, a superstition, a fixed idea. And so we may say anything, but we have to get through that barrier, even though we are talking the same language, using the same English tongue. So here, let me start with a quote from the 8th chapter of Nehemiah. And they read from the book, from the law of God, with interpretation. And the people understood the reading. They read it with interpretation, and the people understood the reading. Paul claims in his letter, the first letter to the Corinthians, you'll find it in the 14th chapter, I would rather speak 5 words in my mind that I may instruct others than 10,000 words in a tongue. 5 words just to instruct others. Well, that has been my hope since I started teaching back in 1938. To make it so clear that there is no misunderstanding. So let me state it clearly now. The spiritual states of the soul are eternal. You do not change them. You pass through them like a traveler. And you start at the very lowest, the tongue, the confusion of tongues called Babel in Scripture, where we do not understand each other. And so we war over strange confusions. The second one is the administrator, the organizer. He will organize the confused states for personal gain. That is the second. And then Paul goes up for 8. He finds the last one, the apostle. Now, the one who played the part in the very lowest is still the same one who's going to play it when he is called as an apostle and sent to tell the true story, the same being. Do not identify with the state called the apostle. While he is in it, he's going to play that part. But he is not there. He is the immortal self, which is the same one seated right here in everyone who is here. So the judge and the one that he is judging are both played by the same being, and that being the world calls God. But they do not know he is the only actor in the world. Only one actor. God only acts and is in existing beings or men. You and I, learning how to create, we create states to deliver others forever. But what we can make, we can unmake. So we do not make permanent states. We create a state and take a friend out of what he was expressing and put him into the state that we create for him. So tell me what you want. All right? You named it clearly. It's up to me now to create the state and put you in that state. What would it be like if he were now what I wish he were? Try to persuade myself that you are that being. To the degree that I am self-persuaded that you are, I have put you in that state. And in that state, while I am faithful to it and you are in it, you're going to externalize the contents of that state. But what I made, I can unmake. I cannot unmake the eternal states. These eternal states are all within the human imagination. They culminate in redemption. And redemption is preceded by apostleship. That's when you are called. And the word apostle means one who is sent. So I am finding myself in a state where I'm called. The night I was called back in 1929, I had no idea I had arrived at that state. But here I'm called into the presence of the infinite love. And it's man. Having answered his question correctly, that love was the greatest thing in the world, he embraced me and we fused and became one body, one spirit. For he who is united to the Lord becomes one spirit with the Lord. At that moment, it was not enough to be called and to be incorporated into the body of God, but to be sent on a mission. And I did not know that mission until it unfolded itself within me. And it took 30 years. 30 years later, suddenly it erupted within me, and the entire story of Jesus unfolded itself within me, casting me in the central role of the story. And then I knew who I am. then I knew who the one called Jesus of the story really is. He is the culminating point of God in man. So when man actually completes the journey and comes to the fullness of it all, he discovers he is the one he's been seeking all through his journey. But he comes to that at the very end. So do not let him brag. Do not let him boast that he is an apostle. Apostle is a permanent state. He is infinitely greater than all the states. He created these, and they are permanent within man, within the human imagination. But when he arrives at that state, it's the last of the journey. And then he awakens and he knows who he is. And these experiences gives him the certainty that he is God. He reads now the word that he read when he was a child. And when before he could read it, his mother read it to him. And then he went to school and he read it in school. And when he could read for himself, he picked up the book, couldn't quite understand it, but he read it. Now he reads it as something entirely different. He knows the book is all about himself. It's not about any being but God. And he's found God within himself, and he is God. But that God of whom I speak is your own wonderful human imagination.